is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Thursday in December, coming to you the day after the Ravens dominate the Houston Texans on Christmas Day, 31-2. We are going to talk about how this affects the playoff picture, the historic day that Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry had for this Ravens offense, and how about the defense essentially pitching a shutout against the Houston Texans. All that and much, much more. But first, the Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota.
Don't miss the 2025 CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament in Baltimore, February 25th to March 1st at CFG Bank Arena. Watch HBCU teams battle to be crowned champion. Check out the free fan fest and performances at the Baltimore Convention Center. Enjoy downtown's top restaurants and stay in one of our amazing hotels. The CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament. You want to be here.
All right, Jonas, you were there in Houston, Texas last night to watch as the Ravens picked up a massive 11th victory of the season, beating the Texans 31-2. And our word of the day, Jonas, is singular. The definition being the only one of its kind, distinctive, unique. Unfortunately, Beyonce didn't play Single Ladies in her halftime show, so that would have made for a nice connection, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. She played a lot more of her recent stuff, which we'll get into. First known usage, of course, it comes back to Middle English. Don't all these words come back to Middle English? 1300 to 1350 from the Latin. The two singular records that the Ravens pulled off today, or yesterday, I should say. Lamar Jackson became the all-time leading rusher by a quarterback in NFL history, passing Michael Vick, and a nice franchise record set for Derrick Henry, topping the franchise record for most touchdowns in a single season. His first season in Baltimore is already historic with one game to play. Jonas, what a day for the Ravens. It was a big day for the playoff picture. It was a big day for the AFC North standings. And what a historic day for the quarterback and the running back that continue to amaze us.
I don't know about you, Paul, but you can tell a lot about me and my psyche by what I'm Googling. And so yesterday,
Scares me.
I found myself, as the Ravens were slowly just putting that Texans team in a chokehold, spending more and more time looking for iconic Beyonce lyrics that I could craft into a tweet, because obviously what better twinning than Ravens excellence and Beyonce excellence? There weren't as many, like, there were a lot of websites, a lot of Google hits that were like, 35 iconic Beyonce quotes for your Instagram story. And they weren't a lot of help. So maybe I was overstating or expecting more, kind of snappy Beyonce lines than I remembered from growing up. I think I ended up just using "Twirl on Them Haters" for what the Ravens did to Houston at halftime. But at a certain point, especially after that, 48-yard touchdown by Lamar, this game was over. I think it was at 24-2 at that point. Houston was, I think, had made it inside the Ravens' red zone just one time all game. Couldn't run the ball, could barely pass the ball. Derrick Henry was getting, 6-7 yards a carry, I felt like. The passing game wasn't super, on time and on schedule, but it didn't really matter because no one could touch Lamar in the pocket. And so you had, the Ravens making an AFC South champion, a top 4 playoff seed, look like a team that was just playing a completely different sport. It was incredible. And, again, the Ravens were peaking at this time last year. It didn't really do them a whole lot of good in the playoffs. They kind of struggled against Houston in that divisional round game. And then obviously we don't need to rehash what happened against Kansas City, because I'm sure we'll be doing that a few more times in the weeks coming up. But I still think you would much rather be where the Ravens are right now, which is having everything come together in this very, very aesthetically pleasing, uplifting way than to see it go like the Steelers way right now.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very similar to the Christmas Day game last year, where they absolutely demolished the Niners on the road. You were out there, not in San Francisco, but a suburb of San Francisco, to watch that as the Ravens dismantled the Niners. And it was the same thing. It was, all right, here are these two teams that are going to be in the playoffs. At that point, I think the Niners are a better, more put together team than the Texans are right now. And we saw that the Niners ended up going to the Super Bowl and losing. I don't think this Texans team is necessarily destined for the Super Bowl, given what we've seen from them, but it's a good football team. It is a well-coached team with a good young quarterback, with a lot of talent, and the Ravens just utterly walloped them. I mean, effectively pitching a shutout. The only 2 points, of course, came from a safety. So the defense effectively shut them out, and the Ravens seem to be clicking at the perfect time. And similar to the game last year where they put the Niners in a chokehold, they put the Texans in a chokehold in this one and announced to the NFL that they are a force to be reckoned with. They might not have the record of the Chiefs, 15-1. They might not, have the MVP, which we'll get into, which is ridiculous. Although I think Lamar Jackson maybe should have taken over as the MVP favorite with that performance last night. But they are clearly one of the best teams in the NFL, one of the best teams in the AFC, and they are going to be an incredibly difficult team to get through. And now that they have an inside track to the AFC North title, one team is going to have to at least come to Baltimore for a playoff game, because the Ravens are almost definitely going to win this AFC North if they can just beat the Browns next week. That is the situation now. With their win, the Steelers lost earlier in the day. All the Ravens have to do is beat the Browns, and they win the division. And you could not go back a couple weeks. You could not see this coming. You would thought the Steelers were the team with all the juice, all the momentum, all the mojo, and it is completely flipped. I don't know if you read any of the post-game comments after that Steelers loss from the Steelers locker room, Jonas, but it is all doom and gloom and despair in Pittsburgh, and it is nothing but joy in Baltimore.
And infighting too. It seems like there's a rogue defender on that Steelers team that is not doing his job. And if they're, I guess you could say that maybe Marcus Williams was that for the Ravens, so they took care of their rogue defender problem a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, I was joking with our colleague Gianna as we were heading downstairs to the locker room that when we did our bye-week roundtable where we were surveying how everyone on staff felt about the Ravens, where they've been, where they were going, none of us picked the Ravens to catch up to the Steelers in the AFC North. I think all of us had them being the number 5 or number 6 seed in the playoffs and then getting Pittsburgh in a playoff rematch. And, obviously there's still a slim possibility that it could be a Ravens-Steelers rematch in the playoffs, but that would, of course, be the Ravens getting the home game, Steelers coming to Baltimore for that. It's still overwhelmingly the case that the Chargers are going to be that number 6 team, which I think, is a little bit of a scary proposition, even as well as these Ravens have been playing. But listen, I mean, you get past them. I would imagine that Buffalo holds serve with whoever that number 7 seed is, and then the Ravens are going to have to go to Highmark Stadium, dead of winter, to kind of exercise some of those playoff demons. But at this point, I mean, I know we're kind of caught up in the recency bias of all this, but the Ravens took care of a division champion on the road, made it look like it was nothing. And then you had the Bills, who in recent weeks have really struggled to stop anyone. And we don't know if that hand injury for Josh Allen is going to be something that's possibly lingering through the playoffs. We don't know, just what that offense might look like come wintertime. I think it's will probably still be a supremely gifted force. But again, like the Ravens are the number 1 team, or they were the number 1 team in DVOA coming into this weekend, or coming into this Wednesday, and they're going to probably pull even further ahead of whoever's number 2 because of just how comprehensive a victory this was.
Yeah, when they're at their best, they look like by far the best team in the NFL. And the problem is we said that the same thing about that team last year, and they played like the best team in the NFL from start to finish, and then they get stopped in the playoffs by the Chiefs. This year's team is a little bit more inconsistent. They're going to end the season with more regular season losses. They're not going to get the 1 seed. like last year's team, but the ceiling is still there. And that's why we've said all season long that even though the Steelers might win the division, we still feel like the ceiling for this Ravens team is higher. And we're seeing it play out over the last few weeks. This team, absolutely, with their offensive firepower, with Lamar Jackson just going beast mode, with Derrick Henry just running over opponents, they have the higher ceiling than the Steelers. And it's nice to see that they are finally overtaking them in the division. Jonas, I'm going to unveil a new award here, a new segment on the Banner Ravens podcast that we're going to keep throughout the rest of the season, however long that goes. It's the Who's Got It Better Than award. And today, fittingly, the inaugural Who's Got It Better Than award goes to Lamar Jackson. It is the player, coach, exec who is having the best time of anybody out there. And Lamar Jackson yesterday was having the best time, despite the fact that he didn't want to indulge in the post-game cake on the field, which good for him for, not wanting to eat a cake that has probably been sitting out under the television lights for all day. Smart decision for his stomach. Lamar finished 10 for 15 for 168 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 87 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 0 turnovers in essentially 3.5 quarters. Now the all-time leading rusher at quarterback. He's got to be the MVP favorite right now, right? I mean, that was a performance that was in front of the nation, and it was a win that gets them one behind the Buffalo Bills in terms of win-loss record. How is he in any way considered having a lesser season than Josh Allen? He is beating him in almost every statistical category. The only category you could say is the Bills have more wins. And guess what? The Ravens have 12 and the Bills now have 13. So they're right there. And Lamar Jackson has been in many ways as good as, if not better than, he was last year when he won the MVP.
I found myself like kind of shaking my head at the stupidity of this NFL.com story from December 18th, where Tom Pelissero surveyed, NFL GMs and executives on who wins MVP, who wins all these other end of season awards. And it's like, you don't call an election on election day by looking at the early voting. You have to consider every single possible vote that comes in. And so it was just ludicrous to me that, that this story comes out where you have Josh Allen as the quote runaway winner, receiving a whopping 22 of 27 MVP votes, when at this point, or I guess like at that point last year, Lamar was not the guy that we all saw getting 49 of 50 first place MVP votes. So, we have not been as a podcast like too engaged with this MVP discourse, because I think we have taken the appropriate tact of giving this some time and space to breathe and see where this process takes us. I mean, you can't call an MVP race in mid-December. It's just simple as that. You can't call it on Christmas Day. It's as simple as that. It was interesting to me to look at the NFL Twitter poll that they did after this game, and they put up the 4 MVP candidates. I think it was Lamar, Josh Allen, Saquon, and maybe Jaden Daniels. Maybe it was Derrick Henry, and basically asked their millions of followers who they thought was the MVP, and maybe a little bit of prisoner of the moment type results in there. But Lamar was the clear favorite. I think he had 55% of the results. And if there are any Bills fans watching, please hold your comments.
They love to hold their
Twitter.
Comments, let me tell you.
But it's hard to find a compelling argument for Josh Allen besides the fact that Lamar didn't deserve to win the MVP last year, which makes it okay to give Josh Allen the same honor this year. I mean, again, from True Media, Lamar has higher EPA per dropback, higher EPA per play. He beat Josh Allen head to head. I think he looks better, to end the season than Josh Allen has. I mean, I guess you could give Josh Allen a lot of credit for what he did against that Lions defense, but in the same way that we should attach some caveats to what Lamar did against this Texans defense, which, as we talked about last, a couple of days ago, is kind of on its last legs with all these injuries. That Lions defense was not representative of the Lions defense that had been, a top 5 defense all season, because they were also just completely depleted by injuries. So, total touchdowns, Lamar has the edge. Run threat, Lamar is the edge. I mean, Josh Allen has made up, I think, a lot of ground just based on the fact that he's been this supreme running threat. But I don't really put a whole lot of stock in that in terms of like overall value, because who has the best red zone offense in the NFL? It's not the Bills. It's the Ravens, because they have Lamar and because they have Derrick Henry. So, you don't want to over-index Josh Allen's red zone rushing ability just because he doesn't have because the Bills don't feel like whoever is next to Josh Allen in that Bills backfield is as good as him. I mean, I guess you could say that Derrick Henry being next to Lamar cannibalizes some of that value, but we've seen what Derrick Henry looked like the past couple of years in Tennessee. And, granted that line was terrible, but it's no surprise that by basically every single metric imaginable, Derrick Henry's having like one of the best years for a running back ever. And I mean, it's not just Derrick Henry. Like, I was kind of toying around with some stats before the game last night, and like on design rushes going as far back as I think 2010, the Ravens are averaging the most yards per carry by any offense on design carries in the NFL. And you put that all together with Lamar having the number 2 passer rating all time, with a chance against following a big game against Cleveland, could be number 1 passer rating ever. I don't think passer rating is especially useful statistic, because it's a little bit starved of context. But at a certain point, being right up there with Aaron Rodgers' best seasons ever as a passer has to be worth something, right?
And he had those ridiculous MVP head-turning viral moments last night as well, which is another part of it. A lot of this award obviously comes down to narrative. A lot of it comes down to who wins their division, who gets the number 1 seed. And some of it comes down to just what appears on the Twitter feeds of the voters. And there should have been 2 plays last night on the same drive that should have appeared on the at least 2 plays last night that should have appeared on the Twitter feeds of some voters. The first one being the ridiculous play where he avoids the sack in the second quarter, flicks it down to Mark Andrews, who rumbles down for a 67-yard catch and run. And then 2 plays later, holds on to the ball, holds on to it, avoids a sack for 8 seconds in the backfield, and then fires it to Isaiah Likely for another magical touchdown. And then you said it, the 48-yard run to the end zone. I mean, those are 3 MVP caliber plays. And you talked to him after the game, and he said he was jogging on that 47-yard. He wasn't pulling up his pants at the same time like we've seen him do before, but he wasn't even going full speed.
No, I mean, and you look back at the highlights of that, and you kind of believe him. Like, he's not fully striding out. He's just kind of chugging along, and no one, I think, he even touched him. So it's hard to find. It's hard to imagine someone being more valuable. It's also, we're approaching a point now where there could be some weirdness in just how the schedule falls for those top 2 MVP contenders. Because I guess if the Bills win on Sunday, assuming they play on Sunday, then I believe that number 2 seed will be locked up. And so there would be no reason for Josh Allen to play in that finale. And you're depriving him of the opportunity to put even more, viral plays on those Twitter feeds and do even more cool stuff to add to his record, and, have him come close, if not surpass Lamar and the various, head-to-head graphics that we see from time to time. Whereas Lamar's going to have to play against Cleveland. And, obviously that could be a little bit problematic for him because of just how this Browns defense has given him trouble over the years. But it could also be a Cleveland team that's, 1, 2, 3 Cancun has already checked out, and maybe Myles Garrett gets nicked up this weekend and just decides that he doesn't want to play in Week 18 because he's already put his body through so much. And there are other injuries in that Browns defense, especially in the secondary, that would probably make it a little bit easier for the Ravens this time around than it was 2 or 3 months ago. So Lamar, has a chance to extend that lead in the MVP in like the raw stats columns even more, and that could be a real problem for Josh Allen, because this is a regular season award, and Lamar's going to have more games to do more cool stuff with than Josh is.
Speaking of doing cool stuff, Derrick Henry did some cool stuff, especially in the first quarter last night. Had 10 carries for 86 yards in the first quarter. And on the broadcast, Noah Eagle of Syracuse University said at one point, after dropping, or actually before dropping, the Merry Christmas line, which was just outstanding. His dad came up with LaMarvelous, and Merry Christmas is right there in terms of outstanding needle drops. Thoughts, Jonas? Do you like Merry Christmas?
On the needle drop?
Merry Christmas?
Yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. I think the Iron Eagle broadcast, the Iron Eagle calls have been probably the best of the Eagle family, but it's we're talking about two different sample sizes here.
I mean, Noah's got a ways to go there. Derrick Henry having 10 carries for 86 yards in that first quarter, and then kind of had the second quarter from hell. Commits the safety when he tries to get a little greedy and bounce it outside. If he just runs forward on that, they're snapping the ball from the 1 or 2 yard line. If he just runs forward, goes down, and it's a no yard, if it's no gain there, that's fine. But he tried to get greedy, took it outside, gets tackled in the end zone for a safety. Not great. But beyond that, he still kind of got back on track. I mean, finished the day with 27 carries for 147 yards and a rushing touchdown. 27 carries is the most that he's had all season. And the Ravens leaned on him. Obviously, they're without Justice Hill in this game. They needed him. He delivered.
Hugely. And again, another game where they are running right at the middle against what we thought was a really stout Texans run defense. Obviously, they were missing a starting tackle. One of their starting linebackers, Christian Harris, looked like he got a little nicked up before the game. Their top two slot cornerbacks are both done for the year. So certainly not as comprehensive a unit as it was, when, again, the Bills struggled against them in early October. But they were still, I think, third in run defense DVOA coming into today. And it was just remarkable what the Ravens were doing in that first and second quarter. I mean, I think Derrick Henry's first 9 runs were all successful, like meaning that they had EPA. They were staying ahead of the sticks so regularly. I think in that first half, Derrick Henry's like average yards before contact per carry was like over 3, and if you're over 2, you're in really, really good shape. So great play calling by Todd Monken to just mix up the kind of play sheet for Houston. There were trap plays, there were zone plays, there were power plays, and it's I think we're probably getting close to, if we haven't seen it already, just like the full expression of what this passing game could be when it's a team this late in the season trying to match the Ravens' power and speed and everything. I mean, I talked with Pat Ricard after the game, and he said, like, it's really, really tough to prepare for this Ravens rushing offense, and it's really, really tough at this point in a 3-game and 11-day span to be ready for this level of physicality. And Derrick Henry, it seems like he's been a little bit unlucky in some of those second and third level runs where it's just like one safety who's 5 inches shorter than him and 50 pounds lighter than him somehow gets that shoestring tackle that keeps him from turning a 15-yard run into a 50-yard run. But he's still having no trouble whatsoever, like getting through the line of scrimmage and moving the pile or shaking off a couple guys to turn the corner and get that first down. And that's a great sign for what this Ravens rushing offense could do if they commit to it. And obviously that is going to be something that is relitigated all over again, even though Derrick Henry was not on that Ravens team that could not run the ball and would not run the ball against the Chiefs last season. But listen, you have Lamar, you have Derrick Henry. I think you have probably a little bit more liberty in putting the ball in Lamar's hands on some read option stuff, because this is kind of go time for Lamar and for the playoffs. And the stuff that you were maybe a little bit cautious about doing during the regular season because you didn't want to expose him to any unnecessary hits. I think you have a little fewer reservations about this time around. And that's a very, very scary thought, because again, this offensive line just looks like it's very, very tied together, not leaving a whole lot of empty plays out there. And you mix that with the play action passing game and all the stuff that they're doing before the snap with motions, formations. And guess what? If Charlie Kohler comes back for the finale or for the playoffs, then that's another piece that you have there to get, multiple with on and just kind of baffle defenses with.
Noah Eagle did say on the broadcast as the Ravens were starting out on that first touchdown drive that the Texans made the choice that they're going to let Derrick Henry beat them on the ground, which why? Why is that the choice that you make? Because that plays directly into the Ravens' hands. I mean, the Ravens established the run to start the game, and from there, that opens everything else up. I mean, they start the game by basically feeding Derrick Henry, and then they do so again on the second drive. I mean, the second drive starts with Derrick Henry up the middle for 20 yards, Derrick Henry up the middle for 8 yards, Derrick Henry up the middle for 7 yards, and then that opens up the passing game. I mean, that plays directly into what the Ravens want to do. And when everything is clicking like that, it truly looks like this offense is unstoppable. It's only the times, I think of the first Pittsburgh game where Derrick Henry gets stopped and Derrick Henry fumbles, and the Ravens get a little bit skittish and they get a little bit worried about feeding their future Hall of Fame running back. It's when they are playing at their best, they are letting Derrick Henry pave the way in the ground. They're letting Lamar carve them up through the air and pick up key gains on scrambles and design runs when he needs to. Just a phenomenal, just all-around outstanding game from the offense when you only need Lamar to throw 15 passes to score 31 points. Pretty ideal.
Yeah, I mean, 7.7 yards per play when Lamar was on the field yesterday, and that's with a lot of runs. Like you said, not a lot of dropbacks. Only one other team this year had averaged even 6+ yards per play against Houston this season. I think it was the Colts, and that was also, I think, strangely a game that like Anthony Richardson and those guys just ran wild. And not to make this a he said, she said, or he did, she did kind of thing. But, when the Bills got trucked by the Texans, or not trucked, but they lost to the Texans in early October, Josh Allen, that offense, just 4.7 yards per play against Houston. So none of the comparisons that we have invoked and fans will continue to invoke in this Lamar versus Josh comparison are going to favor Josh Allen. And, maybe that might not matter because, Josh has had, he's, again, the Bills are the only team to beat the Chiefs this year. They were the team to knock off the Lions after what had been an incredible run for Detroit. And maybe that's all that, Josh Allen needs narratively to keep him, to keep this MVP case ahead of Lamar's. But, at a certain point, if the Ravens are the number 3 seed and the Bills are the number 2 seed, and you can't give you can't make the best player on the best team argument, then I start to think that, or I tend to think that those, the narrativeness of Josh Allen's case tends to fall apart a little bit.
Yeah. How about our guy, Tiny Horse, Keaton Mitchell, getting into the action as well, getting his first touch of the season, finishing with 11 carries for only 20 yards. But he's back. He's back and he's making an impact. Jonas, that's exciting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I was actually surprised that they played Derrick Henry in after midway, the midway point in that fourth quarter, because I just thought they would give basically all the big timers on the team the rest of the game off. But it was good to see Keaton Mitchell finding holes again, without the benefit of Lamar as the gravitational force, kind of keeping run defenses honest. So he obviously had that nice screenplay that just buzzed upfield for a cool 20 yards. I still think that obviously with Justice Hill probably coming back pretty soon from the concussion, not a whole lot of snaps for him. No. But with Rasheen Ali suffering that hip injury that knocked him out of the game, I think like the third or fourth quarter, maybe there's a role for Keaton at some point, either in week 18 or in the playoffs. But again, we're just talking about, putting a hat on the hat. Like the Ravens don't need a whole lot of help in that run game. And it was just a good sign for what Keaton Mitchell has been through and what he could offer perhaps more next year, that he's starting to look a little bit more like himself.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about this defense that basically shut out the Texans, because let's be honest, the big caveat is this is not the same Texans offense that the Ravens faced twice last year. CJ Stroud, for whatever reason, is not quite the same guy that he was in his rookie season. He started out this game very inaccurate. He was missing guys wide open in the screen game. He was missing guys down the sideline, those kind of two deep safety looks. Guys were open and he was just not finding them. He's not exactly better than, or he's not exactly, worse than Bryce Young at this point, but still. He's also without Tank Dell in this game, who is probably, who is done for the season. So he is operating with fewer weapons. However, the Ravens defense in this game allowed just 10 first downs, 211 total yards, 3.9 yards per play, 3.4 rushing yards per attempt. They had an outstanding interception from Kyle Hamilton. If Zach Orr did not earn your trust over the last 5 weeks with, wins, the solid performance in the loss against Pittsburgh, the win over the Chargers, the close loss to the Eagles, the dominant win over the Giants, the win over Pittsburgh, all of which, I think were signs that this defense is improving. I understand if you were more hesitant, if you're a Ravens fan, to say that this defense has definitely turned the corner and Zach Orr has figured stuff out. This should have been the performance, though, where you recognize that the defense has finally caught up, not entirely to the offense, but they're playing complementary football with the offense. And clearly they're playing more confidently. Clearly they're playing more together as a team. And the tweaks that Zach Orr has made have worked. And it is time that we give him his flowers.
Yeah, when you consider what the formula has been for the Chiefs in recent years, when they've been marching to Super Bowls and winning Lombardi trophies, it's like have a top 2 offense in the NFL and have a defense that is good enough and have a special teams unit that is not an active deterrent on whatever you're trying to do from a game-to-game basis. And, the Ravens have a top 1 offense in the NFL right now when everyone's healthy. And the Ravens defense has definitely benefited from some injury luck and just a kind of meh schedule of teams that they've gone against. But this is from Joel Morin on Twitter. Joel V. Morin is his handle. The Ravens defense has seriously turned a corner since week 11, 4th in EPA per play, 2nd in dropback per EPA, or 2nd in dropback EPA per play, 1st in dropback success rate. And that's a far cry, Paul, from where they were at the start of the year when Marcus Williams and Trenton Simpson and everyone was just kind of struggling to keep it together. So if the Ravens can go into this postseason with, again, a elite offense, which we have every reason to believe that they will, if they can go into this postseason with a top 10 defense, which this defense is definitely performing at that level, and then the special teams, can hold it together. And we saw some good, another good kick from Justin Tucker. We saw Jordan Stout make a couple nice kicks. Didn't see any fumbles with the move from Desmond King to Steven Sims at punt returner. Then this team has every shot in the world of being the team that can knock off the Chiefs in Arrowhead on the way to New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a different story from last year, where everything was figured out from the start to the finish. This team was, they had some bumps in the road. I'm not going to say they were perfect, but the starters at the beginning of the season were the starters at the end, and the All-Pros played like the All-Pros you expected them to. This just has been a different story. We've seen, like you said, Trenton Simpson start out the season. Everybody was hyping him up as the linebacker next to Roquan Smith. He gets benched in the last several weeks. Marcus Williams gets benched for Darius Washington. And yet this defense is somehow weathering the storm. And a lot of that goes to Zach Orr. I mean, yesterday, also cool story. It was the 8th anniversary of his final NFL game as a player. Of course, he medically retired because he was, because of different medical conditions, and had to cut his playing career short. But that allowed him to get into coaching and now be the hype man who tries to jump over Ardarius Washington on the sideline after Ardarius Washington comes up and makes an awesome tackle. Did you talk to anybody about that after the game there, Jonas?
That was a Gianna project, but yeah, I think when she talked to Ardarius afterward, he didn't even know that it was Zach Orr who tried to jump him. I think I have it on my phone because I screen grabbed it from from Instagram. Let me bring it up right now. Yeah, Ardario said, "Nah, coach, funny for this. I didn't even know this happened." And then he he tagged Zach Orr, and Zach Orr himself was also said, "Dang, I'm going to need an ice bath tonight. Pumped for my guys." But yeah, I mean, I think we haven't seen as many kind of layups for the pass rush as we did last year under Mike Macdonald. You can say that's offense is catching up to the Ravens scheme wise. You can say that's the Ravens not having as many dominant pass rushers, and I think obviously not having Patrick Queen being that blitzer has definitely limited what this defense could do. But I think it was a good sign, certainly on Wednesday, that like the last sack I think the Ravens had, or one of the last sacks that they had, is one of those classic, Ravens simulated pressures where you are showing a bunch of guys at the line of scrimmage and you're not really sure who's coming or going. And the Ravens are threatening some pressure up the middle, threatening some pressure to the left. And then ultimately it's just a 4-man rush, and it's Zach Orr, or not, excuse me, it's not Zach Orr, it's Chris Board coming basically completely unblocked off the right side or off the left side of the Texans line, the right side of the Ravens defense. And the running back has no clue where to go because he's still trying to figure out the protections. Chris Board gets to CJ Stroud completely unbothered, brings him down. And it happened so quickly that, from where we were sitting in the press box, all I could see from that high up was like the number 9 on his jersey. And I thought for sure that had to be, Odafe Owe winning again up front and getting to CJ Stroud for a second sack. But in fact, it was indeed Chris Board. And, this is a pretty bad Texans offensive line. It's a pretty bad Texans offense. Don't want to make too much of it considering what awaits the Ravens in the postseason and the step up in talent and game plan and consistency. But I think considering just how many times we saw last year, for instance, Arthur and Mollett get to the quarterback on a completely unmarked slot blitz, or, I don't know, someone
Kyle
running
Hamilton
from somewhere unexpected. Yeah, Kyle Hamilton just timing his blitz up perfectly to get to the pocket. Some of that stuff hasn't happened and probably won't happen as often in the playoffs, but it's a good sign that as we've seen Zach Orr and this coaching staff figure out what to do personnel wise, they're also starting to get a little bit more comfort in play calling and layering stuff and getting the offense to think twice about where a certain look might be coming from and then hitting them with a changeup.
Yeah, and we probably haven't talked enough on this podcast about the move of Kyle Hamilton from this kind of Swiss Army knife who could come from anywhere and could rush the quarterback and could be a linebacker and could be a deep safety. The move of him to more of a traditional safety role has also paid huge dividends because it's allowed Ardarius Washington to blossom. And boy, has he blossomed. I mean, on the goal line, apparently he's money. The guy who's 5'8", 180 pounds is somehow incredibly stout when it comes to the 3-yard line. He on that 4th down, where really the only time that the Texans threatened all game to score, on 4th down, he's able to deliver an outstanding hit and keep the Texans out of the end zone. Marlon Humphrey quietly again playing another great game after a kind of a bogus PI call. They could have called it on that play at the goal line, but they let him get away with a contact, and he has a pass breakup there. He's been phenomenal. Odafe Owe actually finished a sack in this one, got to 9 sacks on the season. Kyle Van Noy got to 11.5 sacks, which is ridiculous for a guy who's 33 and has never had a double-digit sack season before this one. So you're getting contributions from some unexpected guys, and it's nice to see. And I'm not going to exactly say that Zach Orr is Mike Macdonald 2.0, because Macdonald, has shaped a lot of defenses in the NFL over the last couple of years, and he deserves a lot of credit for his impact on defenses in the NFL overall. However, Mike Macdonald's first 10 games in the NFL did not go great. Zach Orr's first 10 games in the NFL did not go great. They both figured it out halfway through their first seasons, and the hope is that you may have found another young, great, up-and-coming defensive coach in Zach Orr who just maybe took a little bit of patience, took a little bit of time to get things figured out.
Yeah, and I think the killing fields will continue once more next weekend because it's going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson and that very banged up Cleveland offensive line that's coming. Obviously, a lot more skill position talent out wide with Cedric Tillman and Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku on that Cleveland offense, and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz on Houston. Just is not a very representative group of talent, but nothing about that matchup should scare the Ravens defense. Like that should be a game where not only do they win, but like they hold Cleveland under 300 yards, because that projects as like a very one-sided matchup. And that there should be no rushing lanes to speak of for that rushing game. And
your dog agrees.
So the Ravens should, and the pass rush should be able to kind of impose its will, especially up the middle.
Yeah. Give credit to John Harbaugh for not panicking, not pulling the plug, not inserting Dean Pease as emergency defensive coordinator halfway through this year. Also not panicking, not pulling the plug on Justin Tucker, who seems to have righted the ship, making all his kicks yesterday. Hasn't missed a kick since Craven the Hunter. Jonas, I think the listeners, they've spoken. I think we got to go out and see it. We now have basically a mini bye. We've got all the time in the world, maybe a New Year's Eve, New Year's Day trip to go see the horrific new entry to the Sony superhero universe.
There's so many movies out now that I want to see, Paul. I think I was talking with a friend about seeing Nosferatu. Mm-hmm. Talk with another friend about seeing Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman.
You were going to do a double feature. Which is utterly insane.
The streets are talking. But I have no interest in watching the Bob Dylan movie, even though I like Timmy. Dune is awesome. Timothy Chalamet as a public persona for a celebrity.
He's terrific.
Seems like a great hang. But I really don't want to hear Bob Dylan sing. But I guess Craven Hunter might have to be at the top of that list. I don't know. I guess we'll have to ask our editor, Chris Gorman, if we can expense the $18 movie tickets to just a piece of shit.
I did see the joke on Twitter yesterday, with the dad joke, which I'm stealing, which is Nosferatu. I haven't even seen Nosferatu 1. Taking that one. Yeah, I mean, if the Barbenheimer double feature was going to leave you feeling, introspective about the world, maybe the Baby Girl Nosferatu double feature will make you feel just utterly depressed. I just can't imagine you would ever leave the movie theater after watching those two movies feeling good about yourself or the world at large.
I just spent 3 hours watching the Texans offense try to play football, so nothing can hurt me.
You know what I'm going to do during this mini bye? I'm going to pull a Nosferatu and just grab a dark room and just hurl myself into a coffin and just sleep. Try to catch up on some sleep after what was an interesting stretch. Ravens playing 3 games in 11 days.
I don't even know the Nosferatu lore. I mean, it has to do with Dracula, right?
It's SpongeBob, actually. Yeah, the SpongeBob connection there with the guy Nosferatu's flicking the lights, and as a kid, I had no idea what that was. Basically, Nosferatu, from what I understand, was like one of the first silent movies that came out, and it basically was the story of Dracula, but without any of the names because they didn't want to get sued. So that from what I understand is the lore there.
All right. Sold.
Why couldn't Justin Tucker have dressed up as a vampire and done promotions for Nosferatu instead of Craven the Hunter? Feels like a missed opportunity.
I don't know. There's a lot of things that Justin Tucker has done this year that he probably would like back.
It's fair. Just quickly on this 3 games in 11 days stretch. Incredible that the Ravens came out with 3 wins. I know the first one was against the lowly Giants, but then they beat the Steelers at home. That's a big monkey off their back. And then they go to Houston on Christmas Day and they beat the absolute crap out of the Houston Texans. Look at what the Steelers did in their last 3 games. I mean, losses at the Eagles, obviously to the Ravens in Baltimore, and then just getting walloped by the Chiefs yesterday, 29-10. just what a ridiculous turn of events over the last 12 days. It flips the AFC North standings upside down. It just totally changes our perspective of these two teams right now.
Yeah, 133 combined margin over these last 3 weeks kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? I mean, especially when it's against two playoff bound teams, and yes, the also the Giants. But you've got to feel good about where this team is, where it's headed. Again, I keep coming back to just how healthy this team feels. I mean, obviously, if the biggest injury that the Ravens are dealing with coming out of this one is a hip injury to Rasheen Ali, then you are living pretty good, I think, relative to the rest of the league.
Speaking
And
of which,
a lot of
what was the Nate Wiggins tried to make a tackle? That was the first time I think all season we've really seen Nate Wiggins get blown up trying to make a tackle, which is impressive for a guy who comes into the league very light as a young first round pick. Got blown up, had the medical tent, and there were reports on the broadcast that he was getting looked potentially for a head injury. Did he ever return to the game, or what was the word on that, Jonas?
Yeah, he came back not long after that. I think he just missed that drive, and that was the drive that ended with the Ardarius Washington stuff on the fourth down.
Okay.
So it was ultimately pretty inconsequential. I think he ended up playing his normal amount of snaps. He seemed fine in the locker room. We didn't talk to him, but didn't seem like he required a whole lot of medical attention afterward. But yeah, I mean, again, a lot of credit post game from Ravens players, from Ravens coaches about just this medical staff getting everyone right physically, being very mindful about where they were, where they needed to be as they kind of went through this 3 games in an 11-day stretch. Marlon Humphrey, just looking at the quote right now, I believe it was Marlon. Yeah, he said the walkthroughs that we did went a little bit fast. I talked with director of high performance Sam Rosengarten, one of our guys that does all the blah 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 with speed and how fast we're going and the catapult and everything. And I think the plan we had, it was unmatched to what other teams did. I felt that we came out fresh, ready to go, but that quick turnaround is about who can recover the best, who can have the best plan. And I felt that we had a better plan than them, and I thought that we were a little bit fresher than them. And listen, I think that shows certainly in out wide in space where guys are playing on island, but I think it's probably most apparent, inside and in the trenches. And obviously the Ravens didn't have the best run defense against the Steelers, giving up, over 100 yards or whatever. But if you just look at the whole of the past 3 weeks for the Ravens, they've, won the head-to-head offense versus defense battle 5 out of 6 times when you consider, their offense versus their defense and their defense versus the other team's offense. And that's a testament to, how the Ravens have built their culture, how the Ravens have built their lines, how they've called plays to put themselves in a situation where they're not just pushing a boulder uphill. And I think it's a really good sign now that they have, a week and a half to get their bodies right, recover, maybe come out a little bit fresher against Cleveland and point this team toward the playoffs where, again, because of just their very, very good injury situation, they should be feeling pretty good about where they stand and, how their depth chart matches up against pretty much anyone else's in the NFL.
Nice Sisyphus mention there. Speaking of mythology, are you going to go see are you hyped for the Christopher Nolan Odyssey movie? That one looks at. All I've heard is that he's making an Odyssey movie, and that just sounds outstanding.
I hope they put Tom Hardy in it and give him lines that are just completely inaudible, because that would be very much a Christopher Nolan move.
If he could committing to the bit there. I mean, the fact that Christopher Nolan's like very anti CGI and he's trying to do a movie where they're about a story where there are like sirens and all these mythological creatures. It's just going to be a fascinating test of what you can do with practical effects, Jonas. That's my take.
Speaking of mythological creatures, how was the Beyonce performance from home?
Oh, outstanding. How was it on the field? Because it's hard to, a lot of these like Super Bowl performances, these halftime performances, I do wonder what they're like in person, because we get a totally different view of it on television. What was it like in person compared to were you able to see much of her on the field? Were you able to pick her out? Did they put it, I'm guessing they had like the TV broadcast basically on the Jumbotron above?
Yeah. I guess the only real BTS nugget that I have is just that the walk that Beyonce had to open
Yeah, on the horse.
performance was pre-planned because she did not come out of the tunnel that she appeared to be walking. She was basically already kind of hiding there in secret, as far as I could tell. I don't think the Texans would have created like a special Beyonce tunnel for her just in the bowels of Energy Stadium. So
and her horse,
she where she appeared to show up for the first time from where I was sitting was not where the broadcast would have led you to believe. But yeah, I mean, obviously, none of the Beyonce songs that we were shouting out in our preview pod got any mention in this performance, which is fine. You know, it's gonna be a medley of her newest stuff. But I guess it was interesting that I don't know. Are we considering the Levi Jeans song like SpawnCon based on the commercial that now exists with her doing with Levi's, and also the fact that the car that they had rolled out onto that stadium was just covered in denim?
What word did you just
Beyonce
use?
now not about denim?
No, SpawnCon.
Yeah, sponsored content.
Wow, I've never heard that as an abbreviation before.
How have you not heard
Maybe.
that, Paul?
I mean, it's not quite like
You work in
making.
the social media space.
I don't know anything about social media. It's the dirty secret about me, even though I run it for Baltimore Banner Sports. I mean, it's not exactly making a movie about Nike coming up with the Air Jordans and calling it Air, or making a Barbie movie that's made by the makers of Barbie. But everything's sponsored today, Jonas. You were sponsored. I'm sure that the soda that you're drinking on the podcast right now has some logo hidden on it secretly that you're getting paid for on the side.
Iced tea.
Speaking of which, let's get another note from our sponsor.
CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament in Baltimore, February 25th to March 1st at CFG Bank Arena. Watch HBCU teams battle to be crowned champion. Check out the free fan fest and performances at the Baltimore Convention Center. Enjoy downtown's top restaurants and stay in one of our amazing hotels. The CIAA Men's and Women's Basketball Tournament. You want to be here.
Jonas, before we get out of here, would this game have gone any differently if the Texans had activated their new acquisition, Deontay Johnson?
Paul, did you see the video of him being buddy-buddy with all the Ravens after the game?
I did. What did you make of that?
I mean, I thought it was heartwarming. I mean, obviously,
heartwarming. The guy who refused to come into the game?
I mean, like, you know, I think there's an understanding among teammates that you don't, you know, speak on a man's pockets. So whatever contract situation or whatever contract standoff Deontay and his people had with the Ravens, then I think that would probably have been communicated to the rest of the locker room, and maybe they would be fine with that. But yeah, I mean, it would have been fun to see him out there and have ourselves a revenge game instead of just making us a Steven Sims revenge game. But I don't know. I'm in the Christmas spirit, I guess, maybe a little bit too much. It was just good to see all those guys being holly jolly with one another, even though they barely played together. I did appreciate the tweet from, I think, Mike Kay of the Charlotte Observer, who said that Anthony Miller has now surpassed Deontay Johnson on the Ravens all-time receiving list with that deep catch that he cut on the pass from Josh Johnson. So that was fun. I mean, it's probably. We're probably not going to get that Ravens Texans rematch. So if we harbored any hope of an actual Deontay Johnson revenge game, the chances of us getting it are probably slim to none at this point. But yeah, I mean, it was good to see that there wasn't like bad blood, at least between the guys on offense who are the big name players on this team and Deontay. I mean, you know, he was cordial with us. He was fine with us in the locker room, and I have no reason to have any ill will or animosity toward him. It's just a weird situation that no one's really divulged too much about, and maybe we'll never get the full inside scoop on what exactly happened.
No, I don't want to begrudge any Ravens player from maintaining their relationship or their friendship with Deontay Johnson. It's business. That's completely different from how these guys interact personally. But I did think it was funny that you tweeted out at Jonas_Shaffer that Steven Sims is already one of the most productive number 18s in Ravens history. already, making an impact on special teams, doing a little bit more than maybe Deontay Johnson ever did in Baltimore. It's funny.
It's a cursed number. And like for me, I don't know about your relationship to the number 18, Paul, but watching Vernon Davis at Maryland be just like a freak of nature. He wore number 18, and that was just like a very, very special number to me. And to see it basically be like a clearinghouse for awful players in Baltimore has been very, very, very disappointing.
I think of 18, I think of Peyton Manning.
That's
so
true.
that's immediately where my mind goes. But 18 has just been, the clearinghouse. That's a good way to put it. Poor Jeremy Maclin. All right. That just about does it for the Banner Ravens podcast. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Write us a good review anywhere that you get your podcast. Tell us what you think of our movie takes. That's really what I'm interested in hearing. If you write us a 5-star review, I'll read it out here on the show. That's a personal guarantee from me to you. Also, if you're not subscribed to the BaltimoreBanner.com, what are you doing? It's just $1 for 6 months. Jonas has got you covered there. Gianna Hahn, of course. Kyle Goon. So much great Ravens content as we barrel towards the playoffs. Got a little mini bye here. We'll be back next week to preview the Ravens Week 18 game against the Cleveland Browns. In the meantime, for Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.